But first, let's talk about Pop speaking on Barnes and CP3. So NBA Summer League obviously going on right now. You had Stephon Castle versus Donovan Clingan, Portland Trailblazers versus the Spurs on Saturday. CP3, Harrison Barnes, Coach Pop all there in the stands, or not in the stands, really on courtside, taking it all in. He joined Doris Burke and the broadcast team to answer a couple of questions. This is what Coach Pop had to say about the additions of CP3 and Harrison Barnes.
Been an interesting summer, and I can remember last year doing one of your games, you were talking and a little bit lamenting the fact that you didn't have a lot of guys able to throw lob passes to Victor. Right. With CP3 there, that might be solved now, right?
I think he's gonna teach everybody a whole lot better than I do how to get the ball, not just how to do it, but when and where, that kind of thing. So having he and Harrison come into the fold at this stage in their careers is really wonderful for the youth that we have, because I can say things 54 times over and over again, over and over. When a player that you respect says the same stuff that we're saying to a player, sometimes that's a lot more valuable. And so having them around is going to be super.
So I find that interesting because CP3 said he doesn't want to be a coach, he wants to play. And so you hear Pop say, when you hear a player say something the same thing I'm saying, then maybe they'll listen a little bit better. But CP3 says he wants to learn, he wants to play, he wants to do all those things. So maybe, do you think that that might cause that there's a little bit of a disruption in message there, or am I just looking too far into it?
No, I think it's one and the same, right? I mean, I think CP3 is a coach, whether he wants to be one or not. When he plays, he's a coach. He's a floor general, and maybe the best there's ever been from an intellectual standpoint. For everybody that I've ever talked to, Antonio Daniels was on the show last night, and he said he's the smartest guy in the league and maybe the smartest player that's ever played in the league. And I think there's Magic and there's Paul Westphal and there's been some others that were really, really smart. But my brother-in-law coached Chris and told me at the time, this is more than a decade ago, he's the smartest player I've ever coached.
Alvin Gentry, his brother-in-law.
Yeah, and so he's, there's a lot of things that have been a little that you could criticize Chris Paul for. He's been at times difficult to deal with as an individual personality. He didn't get along with Harden, but that has proven to be maybe Harden and not him. Westbrook, he had his issues with Blake Griffin. He's headstrong. He's a very strong personality, but he's very, very smart. I think at this point in his career, you can do both. He can be a player, and he's going to teach on the court because he doesn't put up for guys not being in the right position. If Devin Vassell refuses to throw Wemby a lob when he's wide open, Chris is going to let him hear it on the next on the way down to play defense. Not these guys that there was so much of that last year where I think Pop was even a little bit afraid to get these guys to go in the hole. They got such thin skin now that some of these players that when you criticize them, they'll go into a pouting fit. And so I think Chris, being a player, can scream at a guy or chew a guy, and it's different than the coach doing it, but the message gets across.
Did you see that as well when Tim, Tony, Manu came into the league, that they needed the veterans? Because I feel like that's one of the things that the Spurs were missing last year. There was no adult in the room. Doug McDermott was the only one that was older and maybe considered a veteran. Like, you can consider Devin Vassell a veteran now, but he's never had that. You know?
100%.
So that's what was missing. Did Tony, Manu, Tim,
Yeah.
Kawhi all have those guys? I mean, obviously Kawhi had the other three, but
So Tim comes
Tim
in.
had David.
Tim comes into a team that had won 60 games the year earlier, 2 years earlier. He's got David Robinson, who's the MVP in '95. Tim's coming in '97, and Dave was at the top of his game. So, yeah, they had Avery Johnson, was a really strong personality. Avery had everybody in line, and then when Manu and Tony come in, they're contending for championships as rookies, with Tim now having already won one and an MVP, a Finals MVP, with David, and so everybody came into the situation where they had grown-ups there, but Wemby did not.
And how important is that to have somebody like that in the room? You see that a lot with the Heat. Like they always have like a Udonis Haslem or a Juwan Howard on their championship teams in 12 and 13. It seems like that's one of those pieces that you just need the adult.
And I said it at the time last year. Wemby is the adult. Wemby is 10 years older than the rest of the roster, even though he's 20. But as a rookie, you can't scream at a guy, give me the dang ball, right? Because you're the rookie and you're the guy getting all the attention, and you don't want to alienate your teammates, and you want to get along. But I'm sure, and you could see it in his body language last year, there were many times when Wemby was PO'd that somebody had missed a wide open look. And late in the season, they figured it out, and they kind of figured you could just throw it in the ocean and he'll go up and get it. And they got a lot better at it. But early on last year, when they were in that 18-game losing streak, there were times where Keldon Johnson had a 2-on-1 fast break with Wemby and could have just thrown it up, but instead would drive and get fouled or something. And Wemby's just like, why didn't you throw it up? So Chris Paul's not going to let that happen.
I just texted Luis the answer to the trivia question just in case he wanted to put up a super. That's the part that's interesting to me is like when we all saw this, the Chris Paul, the Harrison Barnes of it all, we were like, okay, there's going to be an adult in the room. There's going to be veterans now. And I think those two veterans are the most, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. They're the ones that can harmonize the best with this roster because of the skill set that CP3 still has. CP3 is and will always be one of the best passers in the history of the game. He might be slower now. He might not have the best shot. Sometimes it can be a little boisterous on the court and combative with his teammates. He is one of the best passers and floor generals that we've ever seen besides a John Stockton or a Jason Kidd. And he's in that era. He's in that breath. So, and that, when you're looking for a Stephon Castle to take that leap or a Devin Vassell to take that leap or teach a Trey Jones to be a backup point guard, all of those things, that's the person you want them to learn from, whether he's on the court or he's on the bench as a coach.
I went and watched his tape from last year with the Warriors because I didn't know how much he had declined or not or whatever. And you know how when Michael got old, he went from the skying dunks to the fall-away jumper guy because that's what his body would allow him to do. Chris Paul doesn't need to be overly athletic. And you look at his tape last year, now he was hurt a lot, and that does play a factor. But when healthy, he plays at such a pace that he doesn't need to be sped up. It doesn't matter if he's the fastest guy out there. He gets what he wants because he's so smart. He has the screeners set guys up. He gets to his spot where he wants to either pass or shoot, and he can still make plays. And if you watch Castle, we'll talk about this later when we talk about the Summer League, Castle has a similar motor in that you can't speed him up. He plays at his pace, which is a brilliant pace. He's physical. He can get in the lane. He looks for guys. That's going to be really needed. And he's going to learn a ton from Chris Paul. And I think Chris Paul is going to be better than people think because he doesn't need to be 100% the quicker, younger Chris Paul. He's adjusted his game, and he's fine playing at his pace.
And also, if a Harrison Barnes and CP3, who have both played with Draymond Green, can help Jeremy transition into a Draymond Green-like role where he's a great defender, he's a good passer, he can shoot on occasion, but he's more of like an emotional leader of that team. Because I'll say this to my dying day, the Warriors would never have won any of those championships without Draymond Green. Right. And if he didn't kick someone in the nuts in that 3-1 blown lead series against LeBron and the Cavs, they would have won that series too. He's that important to that team.
Should have won the Toronto series.
And I think if they can show him this is what you need to do to be Draymond Green, because I think that's a very clear and obvious comp for Jeremy, because he does see the floor well. He just kind of makes boneheaded plays every so often, more often than we'd like. I think that can really help him as well. So,
yeah.